according to Mark. The Transfiguration of Jesus occurs in a thin place. Historically, mountaintops are seen as places of revelation. The disciples are invited to see Jesus as quantum reality. Divine light shines through his cells as well as his soul. It is written. 6 days after that, Jesus took Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain where they could be alone. And there, Jesus was transfigured before their eyes. The clothes that Jesus wore became dazzlingly white, whiter than any earthly bleach could make them. And Elijah appeared to them, as did Moses. And the two of them were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said, "Rabbi, how wonderful it is for us to be here. Let us make 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter didn't know what he was saying, so overcome were they with awe. Then a cloud formed, overshadowing them, and there came a voice from out of the cloud. "This is my beloved, my own. Listen to this one." Then suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, only Jesus. As they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until after he had been risen from the dead. This is the gospel of Christ. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Grace to you and peace from God, our Creator, and Christ, our wisdom. Some of you may know the book by Anne Lamott, the writer Anne Lamott, called Help, Thanks, Wow, which she says are the 3 essential prayers. Help, thanks, and wow. Today, on this Transfiguration Sunday, I think wow is the operative word here. This is the last day of this Epiphany season, the season of revelation. And we've gone from Epiphany, from that tiny star in the sky, now to this big fireworks finale before we move into the Valley of Lent. But I wonder if we really know what this transfiguration, what this day is really all about. Another writer, Annie Dillard, wrote the classic Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, said, "Does anyone have the foggiest idea what sort of power we so blithely invoke? It's madness to wear ladies' straw hats and velvet hats to church. We should all be wearing crash helmets. Ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares. They should lash us to our pews. For the sleeping God may wake someday and take offense, or the waking God may draw us out to where we can never return." That's not our usual way of thinking about church. I doubt anybody's brought your crash helmet with you today, and we're certainly not going to be lashing anybody to pews. As one commentator said, though, today is a psychedelic Sunday with lights, colors, and strange sounds. Even God shows up. This is no time for a ho-hum, lackadaisical sermon, or worship service. Today, there's no room for business as usual. The challenge will be for us to get out of our comfort zones and worship in a way that invites God's unexpected Spirit to show up and transfigure us. I don't know. Will that happen today? Will we be able to move out of our comfort zone and into the wow zone? Well, we had a reading from 2 Kings, right? The story of the prophet Elijah and transferring, giving over his duties to Elisha, and then taken up to heaven with chariots of fire. I mean, really, what else can you say to something like that? But wow. Abraham Heschel, the Jewish theologian, often said that radical amazement is at the heart of religion. And the German Lutheran theologian Rudolf Otto said, spirituality involves the encounter with the mysterious, tremendous, and fascinating. Well, Elisha viewed that spectacle of those chariots of fire, and he was totally amazed and transfigured. And then the psalmist also was speaking of the glory that was shining forth through Zion. But of course now Zion can be anywhere. Thin places are everywhere, can be anywhere. Remember the story of Jacob's ladder? Right? Jacob fell asleep and he dreamed that there was a ladder going from the ground up into heaven, and there were angels moving up and down the ladder. And then God was there and told Jacob that through him all of the families of the earth were going to be blessed. And then when Jacob awoke, he said, surely God is in this place and I didn't know it. How awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. A thin place. When the boundaries between heaven and earth just disappear. It's a wow moment. And just as this mystical vision alerts us to the reality that God can be here, can be in this place, or in any place, even when we didn't know it, or we didn't expect it. What do we expect? Do we expect God to show up? Do we expect to have that kind of wow moment? And then of course this gospel reading, and any words beyond wow really are inadequate. Anything that I can say about the transfiguration of Jesus will be as insignificant as was Peter's idea of building 3 little huts up on the mountain. Peter wanted to put some structure around the glory of God and contain it within that box. And now I'm supposed to put words around this and make it comprehensible. But just as Peter's big idea turned out to be really foolish, so I feel trying to put words to this manifestation of divine radiance. This is really a great example of the difference between cataphatic and apophatic spirituality. Now don't go, huh? Because I will explain. Cataphatic spirituality looks for God in images and words, like with an icon or in a sermon. In apophatic spirituality, it's believed that God cannot be conceived or experienced with language or symbols or regular functions of the mind, but instead is a deep mystery that can never be fully comprehended or described. This is really that kind of a day. So you can see my dilemma. I mean, we're talking about divine glory, the Shekinah of Hebrew scripture, the dazzling, devouring, unbridled energy of God, the energy of the Big Bang. Remember on the mountain in Exodus, when God appeared like an all-consuming fire. Or, you know, the Chronicles of Narnia, right? C.S. Lewis has said there's nothing tame about Aslan, the lion Christ figure in the story. So it's no wonder that the disciples were terrified as Jesus radiated this divine energy. It was an encounter between Jesus and the divine presence. But the disciples were there too, and they weren't just bystanders. This story was told by all 3 of the synoptic gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So it obviously had an impact on how they saw Jesus and how they saw themselves going on into their ministry. And here's where we come in then. Their story is also our story. Now, today, mountaintops and clouds might not have the same sacred significance to us as it did then. We understand, or at least we think we understand, that there are many places where we might encounter the holy. Sometimes we even seek out such a place, whether it's here at church or a special meditation corner or an altar that we have at home or out in nature somewhere. And sometimes it comes to us totally unexpected. So I wonder if you can think of a time when you have felt that divine presence, felt that all you could say was, wow. Even though you may not have had a transfiguration like Jesus did with a shining face and dazzling clothing, maybe you experienced a transformation, a new way of thinking, a renewed certainty of God's love and care for you, a different sense of what's being required of you when you come back down from your mountaintop experience. Where and how do we seek to encounter the divine presence in our lives? Where do you seek to encounter that divine presence in your life? Now, that's not always so easy, is it? In a world that values the concrete, the scientific, the logical, the words and the images that inform our lives. So where can we create a space for an apophatic experience, a mystic experience of divine wonder and awe? Of course, there are many ways, many practices, and you probably do one, two, or more of them yourselves, or have tried them yourselves. And we could be here all day. We could share our stories and talk about which practices that we use in order to meditate, or in order to praise, or in order to pray. All of those things that we do in order to connect into that divine presence. I'm not going to tell you all of them today, because I certainly could not do that. So I picked one. This is one practice that maybe you already know about and maybe you don't, and maybe it's something you might want to try. It's called the daily examen. It comes from Saint Ignatius of Loyola, and of course an ancient practice of prayerful reflection on the events of your day. So it brings it right into the reality of your life today. And it's usually done at night before you're ready to go to sleep. It's a review of your day. And there are a lot of variations of it, but the basics, this very simply, the basics are 5 things. First thing, give thanks. Simply give thanks. Spend a few moments, just a few moments, in gratitude for the gifts and the blessings of the day, and for God's love for you at all times. And then ask for light. Ask for light. Asking for God's light, a reminder, right, that we can't rely only on ourselves. We need God's insight. We need God's assistance. And we all need to grow in our understanding beyond our own, sometimes too narrow, perspective. So asking for God's light predisposes us to be open to something beyond ourselves, someone beyond ourselves, asking for that light. This is how the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning described the many of us who so often miss what lies plainly in front of us. She said, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries." Well, yes, most of the time, I will admit, I sit around and pluck blackberries. To enter into holy presence, I need to ask God to illuminate the way. And then number 3, examine your day. And just ask yourself 2 questions, simply 2 questions. When today did I experience the greatest sense of belonging to God, to myself, to others? You also could say it in a different way. When today did I experience the greatest sense of the presence of God? Where did I see that? Where did I notice it? And then the second question is, when did I experience the least sense of belonging to God, to myself, or to others? Or when today did I experience the least sense of the presence of God? It's just a way of noticing what we do during our day, and how do we or don't we notice the presence of God that is there for us all the time, all around us. And then the fourth step is simply to seek forgiveness for all of the things perhaps that we didn't live up to our will or God's will that day, and to ask for the healing touch of God, who does forgive and does remove the burdens of our hearts. And then number 5 is look toward the day to come and ask, what will I do tomorrow to live in accord with God's loving desire for my life? And none of these should be long. They shouldn't keep you up at night writing a thesis about it. Just simple questions to review your day and perhaps experience a moment of divine connection. Or not. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes it does, and when it's expected, and sometimes when you're washing the dishes or washing the car or doing something completely, not even thinking about it, you'll have a moment of that kind of experience. Those wow experiences. And other practices can certainly help us. They're helpers for us to be able to get into that presence, or aware of that presence. So doing the exam guarantee a spectacular transfiguration experience? No guarantee. Maybe, who knows? With God, all things are possible, but probably not. But a transformation experience for you? Indeed, yes. Definitely possible. If we're open, aware, listening, paying attention. A time of radical amazement? Definitely possible. A thin place where maybe we don't see the angels going up and down a ladder, but we certainly feel that glorious presence, that encounter with the mysterious, the tremendous, and the fascinating. There's any number of ways that God can show up in our lives, in good times and in bad times, when our best response can only be, wow. Mystic vision alerts us to the reality that God can be in any place, at any time, even when we didn't know it or didn't expect it. Even in church. So maybe we should strap on our crash helmets as we invite God's unexpected Spirit to show up and transfigure us. Wow. Amen. Now I expect you to sing with gusto.
Our hymn of the day today is hymn 715 in the Cranberry Hymnal. It is Christ Be Our Light. Again, hymn 715 in the Cranberry Hymnal, Christ Be Our Light.